Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, SAMER, SINIJLAWI, IFTAH BURMAN, and YIRMIYAHU DANZIG. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for staying with us. And we now want to stay on topic, but shift the discussion a tiny bit elsewhere. This coming Thursday, Israel is set to approve additional housing units in West Bank settlements. Pro-settlements are saying too little. Anti-settlements saying far too much. Let's take a closer look.
Land, the center of world wars and conflicts for decades. For Israel, an ongoing topic of contention and controversy. Just as talks began about a possible visit by US President Joe Biden to Israel in June, the country announced plans for nearly 4,000 housing units in the West Bank settlements. America have openly expressed their opposition, raising questions over whether this presidential trip may be postponed as a consequence. As Israel's coalition seems increasingly fragile, there may also be a temptation for parties to bring West Bank-related policies into the pipeline. A seal of approval is expected for these settlement plans on Thursday, an announcement likely to trigger condemnations from not only the US, but also Europe and the rest of the Arab world. However, does Israel's sovereignty legitimize its desire for expansion? And does the ongoing security threats, both inside and outside the country, justify the government's land-centered strategies? Would Israel's reluctance to expand make it vulnerable, a target for many enemies? Is settlement expansion helping or hindering Israeli interests?
So let's get to it. Is settlement expansion helping Israel at all? Gentlemen, same rules, 30-second each, and then we pick up the debate. SAMER, take the lead.
Well, those who are supporting the settlement policy are really have killed the two-state solution option, and they have awakened the nightmare of most of Israelis, the option of the one state. Now, most of the Palestinians started believing that there is no possibility to have a state in the West Bank, a Palestinian independent state. It's became like an omelette. Once you have an omelette in your plate, you cannot separate the white from the yellow. So now everybody is talking about one state, one equal rights, and this is the nightmare. So congratulations to those who support the settlements. They have brought the equal rights, one state option to the table.
Yeah, a bit closer, some would suggest. YIRMIYAHU, what's your take?
Well, it definitely doesn't hinder the security apparatus of Israel, because we cannot have Gaza Part 2 in Judea and Samaria. That would mean the end of the state of Israel from a security perspective. Now, we need to understand that the status quo in Judea and Samaria is one which entrenches separation between Israelis and Palestinians and between Jews and Arabs. So we need to start moving towards a direction which both recognizes from the Palestinian side that these separations exist to protect Israeli lives from the incitement and violence from people like Hamas, and also recognize from the Israeli side that the Palestinians experience these separations painfully. We need to create more freedoms to live freely in Judea and Samaria and not less.
IFTAH, last but not least.
I think that looking at settlements as hindering or helping is not the adequate way of looking at it, because honestly, there is no negotiation. So there's nothing to hinder or help. There's a very big shortage in apartments in Israel. People are moving out. Today I was in Sderot and I saw people moving out there. More and more houses are being built, not concerned about whether Hamas will fire another barrage of rockets or not. They're buying apartments. So settlements, for the most part, are areas that, according to any negotiations, will stay within future Israel. So why not build them up?
But IFTAH, touching at this point exactly, and of course this question is open for debate, gentlemen. Perhaps the initial stance here needs to be revisited. Setting facts on the ground might potentially, as SAMER said, make a two-state solution a far-fetched notion.
Well, we've seen in the Gaza Strip, the Israelis, we pulled out 8,000 people living in 22 communities. Once upon a time in 1979 from the Sinai Peninsula, settlements were pulled out. We're seeing the Israeli government taking apart settlements in the West Bank today, like Chomesh. So this is something that is achievable if there is a partner, if there is a negotiation. But unfortunately, negotiation is dead. There is no partner. And the last time,
but at some point there will be a partner, but by then, again,
we can address it then. This is not the point of problem. The point of problem is the disability to compromise. On the one hand, for the Palestinians, it's the refugee issue. Abbas has said time and time again, I have no ability to forgo, to give up the right of return. A father doesn't have the right to give up his son a right of return. But do you see 5.5 million Palestinians becoming Israeli citizens?
Allow me to comment on this. How can you justify that any Jew from all over the world can come back to this land because his ancestor has left 3,000 years ago, and at the same time you are not allowing a physical person who has just left 70 years ago to come back to his homeland? This homeland belongs to both of us equally. Yes, there is historical links for Jews in this land, but you have never been alone. We have always existed in this land, and we have equal rights to share this land with you. We have equal rights to return to this land. We call it home also, and we need to live together. So you cannot always give historical rights to Jews and deny it to Palestinians. You cannot always link your actions of settlement to security problems and forget that nobody is protecting the security of the Palestinians. In the war last year in Gaza,
but Samer, anti-settlement voices say that settlements exacerbates terror. Well, recent events underground are showing little correlation between terror activity and settlement expansion. YIRMIYAHU, I'm sure you have something to say to what we've just heard from Samer.
Absolutely. I think we have to understand fundamentally that just as you want Jews, Samer, to understand the plight of Palestinian refugees, whether they live in Judea and Samaria or they live outside of the country, you need to understand the very real security concerns that we have. So we talked earlier, my colleague spoke earlier about negotiations, right? But negotiations begins with good faith. It begins with seriously understanding what it means to be a Jew in the Middle East. And to be a Jew in the Middle East historically, not since 1948, not since 1967, but for centuries, has been one in which we've been fighting for our survival. For the first time in centuries, I'm not even going to go back 2,000 years, but at least since the first time since the Ottoman rule, Jews have had freedoms. We've had basic freedoms. So in order for us to be able to negotiate in good faith, to understand your aspirations and your concerns, you need to understand and recognize that our concerns with our security isn't just something peripheral. It's not an excuse. These are real, legitimate problems that we have and need to be addressed, first and foremost, by the educational system that's run by the Palestinian Authority and the propaganda that is being fed into the Palestinian society by Hamas.
And gentlemen,
you need to remember something, please. You need to remember something. You are now enjoying a very delicious piece of steak on your table, but you have forgotten that you have slaughtered a cow to get this piece of steak on your table. You have forgotten that Israel was established at the expense of a whole Palestinian nation that was dispossessed, and still millions of the Palestinians are under the Israeli control with no rights. So the roots of the problem is the political and national aspiration and rights of the Palestinians. The reason behind the violence that is coming, I admit there is a lot of violence inside the Palestinian society towards Israel, but there is a systematic violence from the state of Israel toward Palestinian occupation. Is not a very sweet operation. It is a very violent operation.
IFTAH, please.
Samer.
If you will, Samer. First of all, 1948, there was the war came only after 1947 suggestion to both sides to create two states, one next to the other. One side refused, and that's the Palestinians. Whether or not today Palestinians regret that or not, that's beside the point. This is what became a war was started by the Arab side, and the Israelis were able to
Yes, well,
to
gentlemen,
try
we're out.
eventually establish a state.
We're unfortunately out of
Palestinians are a
time.
minority that it's taken care
Definitely
of.
not out of passion. I would genuinely like to thank you, gentlemen, for holding this interesting and enlightening debate in such a civil, intellectual manner. Thank you very much, YIRMIYAHU DANZIG, IFTAH BURMAN, and SAMER SINIJLAWI. I'm sorry for messing up your name again. Out for a break. Back in a bit.